First of all, I'd like to ask you about Paranormal State, the new class.
Yep.
What can you tell me about it?
Paranormal State, the new class, is a kind of spin-off from the original cast. Everybody from the original Paranormal State has graduated, and so they've moved on, and A&E was trying to rework it with a new cast. We don't know where it stands at this point. Actually, Ryan from the original cast got pretty ill, and that's one of the reasons that the old cast went away. So we're still trying to figure out what's going to happen with that, but most of the episodes are available online, Netflix, Hulu. People look up Paranormal State, the new class. They can find the episodes that we filmed from a season ago, I think.
Okay, I'm sure you get this question all the time, but what was the scariest experience you've had?
It's always a good question. It's one of those weird ones, though, because whatever's happening at the moment is the scariest experience that you've ever had. I always tell people, too, it's hard for me because being born and raised in Detroit, like, sometimes just being downtown on Cass Corridor at 4:30 in the morning can be scarier than being in a haunted location. But I was involved with a Vatican-sponsored exorcism in 1999, and so that was a complete mind shifter to be able to experience an actual exorcism, which, in my opinion, has never been shown on television, will never be shown on television. It's too intense of an experience, and I don't think that the psyches of the masses of America could handle watching a real exorcism.
Wow, what were you working on at the time when you were a witness to that?
At the time, I was actually researching a case about a 1953 UFO encounter over Lake Superior in Michigan. It's called the Kinross case. It was a airline... There was a fighter jet that was scrambled over Lake Superior to intercept a UFO, and it vanished. It was never found. And the family, still to that day, had never received benefits. The government couldn't say whether the guys were dead or alive. They were not even classified as missing in action. So that was the case I was working at the time, and I've been friends with people in the Archdiocese for a long time. Back in the 90s, I worked with Father Malachi Martin, who was a Jesuit priest who did exorcisms for the Vatican, and so I think that's how they came in contact with me.
Okay, and UFOs are another interest of yours?
Anything weird. Ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, monsters, time travel. If it's weird, that's what my lectures are about.
Have you ever had a sighting?
Of a UFO?
Yes.
Absolutely. Birmingham, Michigan, 1993. I saw a kind of typical triangular black-shaped object moving around silently in the sky. The thing that always has weirded me out the most about it was I've spent the past 25 years doing this, researching weird stuff, and when I was looking at it, the last thing I was thinking about was that it was a UFO. Until it was gone and I couldn't see it anymore, and then the idea popped into my head. Well, then it made me think back to a conversation I had with a researcher named John Keel in the 90s. And John Keel believed that you could actually be blocked from thinking about the experience while the experience was happening, so it would seem more dreamlike to you. And that's exactly what it was like. It was very bizarre.
Author of the Mothman Prophecies.
Author of the Mothman Prophecies.
Right.
Yep.
Wow. Well, talk to me about... okay, well, before we get to your latest work, I have to ask, what do you tell people who are skeptical or who might have questions about it and who say, well, show me the proof?
It's one of those things for me as a researcher, because I started off as a historical researcher, and history is so fluid and ever-changing that I really don't believe in anything. If I'm going to be honest and collect data in an honest fashion, if I'm biased in any direction, my data will be skewed in that direction. There's confirmation bias is rife in this field. And so it's very important, especially with skeptics, if you're open-minded, then that means that you're open-minded to everything. And so when people are 100% skeptics, it's as bad as being 100% believer. It's that very hard. People always say pick a side, and they say that because it's hard to walk a middle line. And that's really the safest place to be.
Don't bother me with the facts my mind has made up.
Right, exactly. It's very funny that you have scientists tell you there's no such thing as paranormal phenomena, because no scientist studies paranormal phenomena because it's not real. So then they block themselves in this thing where they'll tell you, oh, I know it's not real. You say, you studied it, and they say, no, I don't need to, it's not real. Well, then you can't make the judgment call that it's not real if you haven't studied it.
Sure. Well, John, talk to me about your latest work you've got going on about the Michigan Dogmen.
Yep, I have 2 projects that I'm working on now. One is a podcast called Realm of the Weird, and it's a little 15-minute based on, they're kind of constructed like old-time horror radio shows, but they're all real case files from the past 25 years. And sometimes use real witness testimony. You'll hear the real witnesses talking. You'll hear police chasing UFOs. Like I have the tapes of them doing that in Traverse City. So that's Realm of the Weird. And then I started working on a documentary about the Michigan Dogman about a year ago. And it's a full-length documentary about upright canines that are spotted in Michigan and in Wisconsin. And it even talks about the back history in Australia, where they see upright canines all the time. I know a lot of people are fascinated with Bigfoot, but for us in Michigan, like, we have Dogman, which is great. And a lot of people think that it's a kind of myth because of a song that was released on April Fool's Day back in the 80s. But we have sightings of the Dogman all the way back to the 1700s. And that's what the documentary covers. And then there's a side, there's like an after documentary, which is a mockumentary, to kind of lighten things up, called The Son of the Michigan Dogman. And it's kind of this documentary about, we find the guy who is the son of Michigan's Dogman and what his life is like having such an infamous cryptid as a father.
Wow. Sounds interesting. How did I mean, I've never heard of it, but how did you get tipped on the Dogman mythology, if you will?
You know, it's crazy because Linda Godfrey is an author. She wrote a book called Weird Michigan. She also wrote The Beast and Bray Road. She's probably the person who's pushed the Dogman to the forefront. But what's interesting is in Detroit we have, now it's become very popular, but the Name Rouge, which is the Red Dwarf. There's even a march to Name Rouge downtown. And years ago, back in the 80s, when I was trying to find stories about the Red Dwarf, I was running into stories about these little upright canines that ran around. And that they always got classified as the Name Rouge because people didn't talk about the Dogman so much. So now, actually, a lot of the cases of the Red Dwarf in Detroit have been moved over into Dogman cases.
Wow, do you know what the last, or one of the latest sightings might have been for Dogman?
For Dogman, the last current report that I got was last year, just outside of Grayling, Michigan. That someone, I think it was right off, I think I-75 cuts right through Grayling. It's either Grayling or Gaylord, I'm kind of buzzing at the moment. But right by the side of I-75, someone saw what they thought was a wolf during the day, which uprighted itself as the car went past. And so we're talking about a wolf that stands up on its hind legs and is 6 or 7 feet tall.
Wow.
So last year.
Wow. Have they been ever known to like make contact with humans or to attack them, or are they?
You know, it's one of those weird cryptozoological creatures that actually does chase cars, has kind of been threatening to people. Michigan is weird in the sense that...
A Michigan chupacabra?
Yeah, well, that's our Red Dwarf, is our chupacabra. But we've also had Bigfoot attacks in Michigan. Bigfoot attacks are pretty rare. But in the 1960s, we had a Bigfoot try and pull a woman out of a car. And so, yeah, the Dogman has been known to be a little scary, and even our Bigfoot is a little scary.
What do you think of current shows like Finding Bigfoot or the Ancient Aliens?
You know, it's weird with television, and I try and tell people this, like, it's great to start dialogues and discussions, but any show on television is for entertainment purposes. It's meant to shock you and scare you, and if you can draw some good conversations with your friends and maybe open your mind a little bit more and rhapsodize and talk about the philosophies behind those things, if that's what those shows can generate, that's the best thing they can do.
Awesome. Well, for fans who want to know more about the stuff you're working on, including the Dogman, where would they go?
The easiest place they go is weirdlectures.com. That's pretty much my blog. And then realmoftheweird.com is my podcast. And I'm always willing to follow people on Twitter if they follow me. That's at John E.L. Tenney. And then they go on facebook.com/weirdlectures, and I accept all friend requests. Constructing and talking to each other is the only way we're going to solve anything.